Before we dive in, here's a quick interactive moment for you. If you're enjoying these cinematic HFY stories, hit that like button, drop a comment with the next alien species you want to see humanity outsmart, and subscribe so you never miss the next chapter. Now let's begin. The mercenary exchange hub was loud until the contract appeared. Then the noise collapsed into a suffocating silence. The hollow screen flickered to life above the crowd, projecting a blood-red glyph followed by a stark line of text: Apex Predator, Kralter, neutralization or capture. Reward, 2.4 million credits. Even the air recyclers seemed to hesitate. Commander Varric, towering and scarred, halted mid-step. His scales reflected the crimson glow, the color of danger among his species. Few things rattled a seasoned Varnak warrior, but this contract did. Beside him, Sergeant Threx's 8 limbs subtly curled inward, an instinctive defensive posture his kind hadn't evolved out of despite centuries of sentience. The arachnoid's voice rasped low, the clicking of mandibles underscoring every word. They want us to hunt that? Every fool who tried ended up vaporized, digested, or simply missing. Varric grunted, a sound like rocks grinding. The exchange grows desperate. But even desperation shouldn't cloud reason. Kralter isn't a target. It's an extinction event with claws. Around them, mercenaries drifted away from the screen as if distance alone could save them. No one dared speak loudly. The contract carried a weight, a memory of teams who never returned. Every veteran present had heard at least one story: the fortress shredded from within, the elite strike crew who vanished without a distress call, the lone distress beacon recovered with nothing but static screaming through it. Varric remembered the remains of an armored exosuit found torn open as if made of paper. That image alone was enough for him to mutter, "This contract will rot on the board. No sane soldier touches it." A mechanical chime punctured the tense silence. "Contract accepted," the exchange AI announced, its monotone cutting through the hall like a blade. User human, Elias Dane. The room froze, disbelief washing over the assembled killers and veterans. Threx's eyes, all 8 of them, widened. A human? Did it say a human? Ripples of shock spread. Someone snorted. Someone else laughed in that nervous, brittle way that meant fear was leaking through. Humans had carved a place in the galaxy, sure, but mostly through stubbornness, not sheer strength. Their biology was unremarkable, their technology middle tier at best, their military records respectable but hardly legendary. They weren't helpless, but they certainly weren't the type to challenge Apex-level monsters alone. Varric crossed his arms, tail flicking with irritation. "Identity confirmation," he demanded. The AI provided a rotating projection of a man, mid-30s, lean, dark hair cropped short, eyes focused with unsettling calm. Threx studied the projection. He doesn't even look enhanced. Not cybernetic. Not gene-modded. Nothing. His mandibles clicked sharply. He must be suicidal. But Varric didn't respond immediately. The longer he watched the hologram, the more he noticed the stillness in the man's posture, the careful way he held himself. No tremor. No arrogance. Just readiness. Varric recognized that readiness, the kind that came from someone who had survived more than he'd spoken aloud. "That one," Varric murmured, "is either delusional or deadly. And I do not believe he is delusional." Across the hub, mercenaries whispered in clusters. Some speculated he was an experimental soldier. Others assumed he misread the contract. One swore he saw the human earlier, walking with nothing but a duffel bag. No heavy weapons, no squat, not even a stealth rig. "Why?" Threx asked. Why would he accept something even the guild hunters refused? Varric didn't have an answer. Instead, he observed the corridor as a figure entered from a docking platform. The conversations quieted instinctively. The man in the projection had arrived in the flesh. Elias Dane walked with a steady gait, his boots echoing against the metallic flooring. He carried a single worn duffel slung over his shoulder, the kind soldiers used decades before energy packs became standard. His jacket was rugged, civilian, scuffed from real use rather than fashion. Nothing about him screamed danger. If anything, he looked contained. As if every movement was decided a fraction of a second before his muscles obeyed. He approached the contract terminal with no hesitation, palm pressed against the biometric pad. The machine scanned him again, validating his acceptance. Multiple mercenaries stepped back, creating a growing radius around him. Not out of respect, out of uncertainty. Threx whispered, "This is madness." Varric's voice deepened. "No. Madness trembles. This one does not." Elias glanced briefly at the crowd around him. His gaze wasn't challenging nor dismissive. It simply passed over them as if calculating something no one else could see. When his eyes landed briefly on Varric and Threx, the commander felt something unexpected. A flicker of recognition, not personal but professional. This human wasn't blind to the danger. He understood it intimately. Elias adjusted the strap of his duffel and moved toward the shuttle gates. A few mercenaries called out half-hearted warnings. "You'll die out there, the thing eats squads, nobody comes back." Elias didn't acknowledge them. But just before he stepped through the security archway, he paused as though choosing whether to speak. He didn't turn fully, only enough for his voice to carry. "It's not invincible," he said. "Everything leaves a pattern." Then he disappeared into the corridor toward the dropship bay. Silence lingered long after he left. Varric exhaled slowly. "He intends to hunt it," he said, the statement both a prediction and a revelation. Threx shuddered. "Alone." Varric's jaw tightened. "We should watch this. Either the human will die swiftly." He paused, considering the unsettling alternative. "Or he will prove every one of us wrong." The exchange terminal dimmed, but the unease it sparked stayed. The contract wasn't merely accepted. It had become a mystery that demanded attention. And as Varric stared at the empty hallway Elias had walked down, he felt an unfamiliar tug of curiosity, one strong enough to override his better judgment. Whatever awaited Elias Dane on Ravkar, the galaxy would not ignore it. And neither would Varric. The hunt had already begun. The descent toward Ravkar began with turbulence strong enough to rattle bolts loose from a lesser craft, but Elias sat calmly in the narrow seat of the dropship, one hand resting lightly over the duffel at his feet. The pilot, a jittery avian contracted for transport only, kept darting glances at him as if expecting the human to change his mind. Elias didn't. His eyes stayed fixed on the view through the reinforced canopy. Boiling clouds churned with acidic mist, lightning branching in violet arcs that never quite touched the ground. The planet looked like it was trying to refuse visitors. "You know," the pilot muttered, voice trembling, "most people don't go down there voluntarily." Elias answered without shifting his gaze. "Most people aren't looking for what I am." The pilot didn't ask what that meant. He simply lowered the ship through the atmosphere until the hull groaned under the pressure and the landscape unfurled in fractured colors. Jagged obsidian ridges, forests that writhed like breathing organs, plains scarred by ancient lava flows. It was a world where natural selection felt like an ongoing war rather than a concept. Elias studied the terrain as if memorizing a map he had already rehearsed 1,000 times. He wasn't reckless. Every step of this mission had been calculated, from atmospheric entry timing to the composition of the air. He knew Ravkar had oxygen pockets mixed with corrosive vapors, he knew gravity swelled unpredictably near certain tectonic nodes, and he knew Kralder made this planet its sanctuary for a reason. Everything here was designed to kill. But death never intimidated him, it only sharpened his focus. When the dropship touched down on a rocky plateau, the landing gears scraping the uneven surface, Elias stood and slung the duffel over his shoulder. The pilot unbuckled long enough to open the hatch but hesitated to leave the safety of his seat. "Pickup window is 72 hours, the pilot said. "If you're late, you're staying." "I won't be late," Elias replied. He stepped out into the biting wind, the door sealing behind him with a hiss. The ship lifted off immediately, thrusters flaring as though the planet itself threatened to swallow it whole. Elias watched it vanish into the clouds before turning to take in the environment more fully. The air burned faintly in the throat, the way certain battlefield smokes had back on Earth. The ground vibrated with subterranean movement, distant rumblings traveling upward through the soles of his boots. He knelt briefly and pressed his fingertips to the soil. Warm, mineral-rich, undisturbed. He scanned the horizon, noting the direction of the wind, the flight paths of scavenger birds, the subtle shifts in vegetation. Patterns. Always patterns. Life might be unpredictable, but behavior rarely was. Even predators followed rules, rules shaped by hunger, instinct, and territory. He whispered to himself, "Let's see how you think." Far above, hidden in the glare of the cloud break, a reconnaissance vessel drifted just outside sensor disturbance range. Varric leaned forward in the cockpit, eyes fixed on the magnified image of Elias moving across the plateau. Threx worked the instruments beside him, half of his limbs manipulating panels while the others steadied him. "He walks like he's on a casual hike," Threx muttered. "He walks like someone who's done this before," Varric corrected. Their curiosity had overridden their caution. Watching a human march into a death world after an apex predator was either a lesson in futility or a revelation waiting to unfold. Varric wanted to know which. Down below, Elias continued deeper into the wilderness. The first threat came from the earth itself as a thicket of serpent-like vines quivered and shot upward, aiming for his legs. He pivoted smoothly, sidestepped the strike, and severed the tendril with a compact blade drawn from his sleeve. The vines recoiled, releasing a hiss that sounded unsettlingly alive. He didn't linger. He catalogued the encounter, mentally marking the plant species and its territory so he wouldn't be distracted by it later. Efficiency was survival. Hours passed before he reached the edge of a ravine carved by generations of volcanic upheaval. He crouched behind a ridge and observed the canyon floor. Something massive had moved through recently, three-toed impressions, each one deep enough to collect pools of rain. They led toward a crevice dark enough to swallow daylight. Elias traced one print with his hand, feeling the depth, studying the spacing. Crawler was fast but not in a chaotic way. Its stride length was consistent, its turns deliberate. It hunted intelligently. A faint tremor shivered through the ground. Not seismic footfall. Heavy. Rhythmic. But not from the direction he expected. Elias shifted instantly, sliding behind a cluster of basalt pillars just as an enormous shadow rippled across the canyon mouth. Ravkar's wildlife was full of monsters, not all of them Kraldar. But this shadow moved differently, too silent, too fluid, too aware. He didn't breathe. Not because he was afraid but because lungs expanding made noise. He waited until the presence drifted past, a blur of motion vanishing into the deeper fog. Only then did he exhale softly. The apex predator wasn't approaching him directly. But it knew he was here. He secured his duffel and began assembling a small device from its contents. A metallic resonator, a handful of scavenged mineral shards and a narrow coil. When activated, the contraption pulsed a low-frequency hum, faint enough that only something attuned to its environment would detect it. Elias placed it near the tracks and stepped back. The resonator was bait, not to lure the predator but to observe how it reacted to the territory breach. He wanted to understand its response time, its pathing, its aggression threshold. Knowledge always came before confrontation. Minutes later the hum stopped. Not because the device malfunctioned but because something large had crushed it underfoot. Elias stared at the broken remains, then at the new footprint beside it. The difference was subtle but unmistakable. A slight twist in the toes, the sign of a creature pivoting quickly, aware of a trap. Elias felt a small surge of satisfaction. "You're testing me too," he murmured. Above the canyon, hidden in a pocket of fog, a faint glimmer of movement signaled that Kraldar was watching him. Not attacking. Not yet. Observing. Calculating. The predator had recognized him as something more than prey. Elias adjusted the straps on his pack, turned toward the narrowing path ahead, and continued his descent into the canyon, fully aware that the real hunt had only just begun. Elias moved along the canyon floor with deliberate caution, each footfall placed as though he were navigating a minefield. The echoes of shifting stone rolled through the ravine, but none of them belonged to his steps. Ravkar had a way of magnifying its own heartbeat, making every rustle feel like the planet whispering warnings. Elias listened closely, filtering natural rhythm from intrusion. He could sense when the world was merely breathing, and when something else was stalking within it. That something revealed itself when a pebble fell from a ledge far above. The sound was tiny but it was too controlled, too purposeful. Elias didn't look up. He slid behind an outcrop of volcanic glass, exhaled slowly, and tightened his grip on the compact blade hidden against his forearm. A second pebble clinked down, followed by a ripple of shifting air that didn't belong to the wind. Kraldar was close. The apex predator didn't roar or hiss. It moved like a phantom, its presence felt before its shape became visible. Elias caught only fragments through the haze, muscle coiled beneath obsidian scales, elongated limbs built for speed, a crown of sensory tendrils twitching in anticipation. The creature perched silently on the cliffside, its body angled with predatory precision as it studied the human below. Elias didn't let the creature's stillness deceive him. Stillness in predators was never calm. It was calculation. The first strike came without ceremony. A jagged shard of stone shot past Elias's head, thrown with enough force to embed itself deep in the opposite wall. Elias rolled to the side, dust billowing around him. The predator dropped into the canyon in a fluid motion, landing with barely a sound despite its mass. Its eyes, two glowing slits, focused directly on him. He rose from the ground and stepped backward, deliberately slow, giving the impression of retreat while actually drawing the creature toward a specific point in the ravine. His earlier reconnaissance had revealed a narrow choke where the canyon pinched together, forming a natural bottleneck. He needed the fight to move there. Kraldar lunged, its claws scything through the air. Elias dodged at the last moment, feeling the heat of displaced wind skim across his cheek. The creature struck again, faster, more precise. Elias barely avoided the blow, catching a shallow cut along his ribs. The pain flared, sharp and immediate, but it told him something important. The predator wasn't using full force. This was testing, probing, hunting by assessment. He responded in kind. Elias flung a sphere from his belt, a small device no larger than a fist. The sphere shattered on impact with the ground, releasing a burst of mineral dust that momentarily clouded the canyon. Kraldar recoiled as the dust disrupted its sensory tendrils, forcing the creature to rely on sight alone. Elias used the distraction to sprint deeper into the ravine. The creature followed instantly, its stride monstrous yet unervingly graceful. Each leap carried it over boulders as though gravity were optional. Elias felt the air behind him tremble with the creature's pursuit, every step pushing him closer to the choke point. Above the canyon, Varric and Threx watched the chase unfold through magnified screens. Threx's limbs jittered with a mixture of dread and fascination. "He's provoking it," he whispered. Varric's jaw tightened. "He's learning it." The canyon narrowed abruptly, its walls rising steeply on either side like jagged teeth. Elias slid into the constricted space, skidding across loose gravel. Here, the predator's maneuverability would be limited. But confinement came with its own dangers. If the creature pinned him, escape became impossible. Kraldar entered the choke point with a hiss of irritation, its sensory tendrils slicked back against its skull. The dust had cleared enough for it to see again. Its eyes burned brighter as it advanced, claws scraping lines into the stone. Elias faced it squarely now. Running had served its purpose. This was the moment he needed. He bent low, scooping a handful of gravel, then hurled it at the canyon wall. The sound echoed, creating a phantom presence. Kraldar reacted instantly, whipping its head toward the noise. Elias used that fraction of a second to attach a small device to one of the canyon's weak points. A charge not meant to kill, but to stun. The creature turned back just as Elias detonated it. The explosion wasn't large. It produced a concussive wave that cracked the stone and sent shards flying in every direction. The blast staggered the predator, pushing it backward against the wall. Its talons dug into the rock as it steadied itself, snarling with a deep, vibrating resonance that shook dust from the canyon ceiling. Elias used the moment to close distance. He darted forward, blade in hand, aiming for the creature's sensory tendrils. If he could damage them even slightly, it would reduce the predator's ability to track him. But Kraldar recovered faster than anticipated. The creature twisted, its arms sweeping in a brutal arc. Elias attempted to duck, but the claw grazed his side again, this time deeper. Blood warmed his shirt as he stumbled back, catching himself against the canyon wall. Kraldar advanced, sensing weakness. Its movements were more aggressive now, the earlier restraint abandoned. The air shook as the predator prepared to strike with lethal intent. Elias steadied his breath. He wasn't finished, not yet. Planting his boots firmly, he met the creature's gaze. "You're faster than the report said," he murmured, his voice steady despite the pain. "But you're still predictable." The predator paused. It understood tone even if it didn't understand language. For the first time, Elias saw something like curiosity flicker across its features. The creature tilted its head, considering him in a new light. This moment of hesitation wasn't coincidence. It was recognition. Elias wiped blood from his side and forced himself upright. The hunt had escalated from chase to duel, and both combatants understood it. Kraldar had drawn blood. Elias had made the creature adapt. They were no longer acting out predator and prey, they were learning each other. The canyon rumbled faintly, signaling another seismic shift rolling through the depths of Ravkar. Loose stones tumbled from above. Kraldar's eyes flicked upward in irritation, then back to Elias. The fight was far from over. Elias pushed off the wall, gripping his blade tighter. He needed to move, to reposition, to exploit the creature's brief uncertainty. The next encounter would be decisive. And as he retreated deeper into the canyon, Kraldar followed with renewed ferocity, a silent shadow locked onto the human who dared confront it. Elias retreated along the narrowing canyon path, one hand pressed against the bleeding cut along his ribs. The pain followed him like a shadow, insistent but manageable. What mattered more was the way Kraldar's pace had changed. The creature no longer tested every movement. It pursued him with purpose, adapting its gait to the shifting terrain, no longer relying on instinct alone. Elias had forced it to evolve mid-hunt, an unsettling accomplishment. The canyon floor sloped downward into a valley of broken stone. Elias descended carefully, boots scraping against the unstable ground. A tremor rippled beneath him, followed by a low groan deep within the earth. Ravkar shifted again. Seismic pulses had plagued the planet since he arrived, but now they felt more frequent, more unpredictable. The predator didn't slow. It vaulted effortlessly over collapsing shale, using its long limbs to stabilize itself with unnerving elegance. Memories flickered at the edges of Elias's mind, uninvited, sharp, and unwelcome. A storm-ravaged research colony. A creature engineered by human ambition and destroyed by human panic. His own squad wiped out in less than an hour. The thing they fought had been different from Crawler, mindless, ravenous, blind with aggression. Yet the lesson it taught him was the same: strength didn't guarantee survival. Understanding did. Pattern recognition had saved him when force couldn't. And now, facing a new apex predator, that old truth guided his every move. At the valley's center, a cluster of crystalline rock formations rose like jagged sculptures, their surfaces reflecting fractured light. Elias approached them, studying the angles, the fractures, the way the structures trembled when the wind swept through. Perfect. Natural resonance amplifiers, he could turn them into traps. He dropped his duffel and assembled another device, this one larger, consisting of a coil, 2 magnetic clamps, and a vial of shimmering dust he'd mined earlier from a toxic mineral bed. He anchored the device against the crystal cluster and activated the coil. A faint hum vibrated through the air, weaving into the natural frequencies of the crystals. The resonance would distort sound, create illusions, disorient any creature relying on auditory mapping. Kraldar appeared at the ridge above, its silhouette framed against the swirling clouds. Elias stepped back from the trap, breathing slowly, watching the predator study the valley. It understood now that Elias wasn't fleeing blindly. It hesitated briefly, sensing uncertainty but refusing to retreat. The predator leapt into the valley. Resonance pulsed through the air. The hum intensified, refracting off the crystal surfaces. The echoes multiplied, bouncing at impossible angles. Kraldar's sensory tendrils flared in distress, twitching wildly as overlapping sounds fractured its perception. It swung its head sharply from side to side, trying to pinpoint Elias's location. Each movement grew more frantic as the trap confused its spatial awareness. Elias circled behind one of the larger crystal spires, watching the predator stumble slightly, a rare sight. But he knew confusion wouldn't last long. Kraldar was too intelligent, too adaptable. It would recalibrate quickly. He allowed himself a moment of grim admiration. "You're learning faster than I expected." Kraldar staggered forward, scraped a claw against the crystal and froze. Its limbs tightened. Its breathing shifted. It had found a way to compensate, dampening its sensory input to minimize the distortions. Elias saw the exact instant clarity return to the creature's posture. The predator turned its head toward him with deadly precision. He moved first. Elias darted toward a narrow gorge splitting the valley, using the terrain to disrupt the creature's line of attack. Kraldar sprang forward, its claws shredding stone where Elias had stood seconds earlier. The force of the strike sent shards flying, several slicing across Elias's arm. He kept running, breath steady despite the new sting. He reached the edge of the gorge and slid down the incline, landing on the rocky floor below. Kraldar followed immediately, landing with enough weight to shake loose a cascade of gravel. Elias didn't stop. He moved deeper into the gorge, toward a cavern opening carved by centuries of thermal erosion. The space narrowed into a labyrinth of tunnels illuminated faintly by bioluminescent fungi clinging to the walls. Inside, the air grew colder, more humid. Sounds bounced unpredictably, creating an eerie symphony of echoes. Elias used them to mask his footsteps while the predator's larger frame scraped against the tunnel walls, announcing its presence with every movement. The cavern widened suddenly, opening into a chamber streaked with veins of metallic ore. Here Elias set his most important trap. He reached into his pack and removed a compact seismic charge, small but powerful, designed to destabilize the ground rather than create a lethal explosion. He planted it at the chamber's weakest point, a natural fracture running along the floor. He turned as Kraldar entered. The predator slowed, its gaze narrowing. It understood now that this confrontation had layers. This was no simple hunt. Elias wasn't prey, he was an opponent. The creature emitted a low rumble, the sound vibrating through the cavern like a challenge. Elias drew a deep breath, ignoring the warmth of blood sliding down his side. "You're not the only one who adapts." Kraldar lunged. Elias triggered the charge. The ground convulsed. A network of cracks exploded outward, the floor collapsing in sections. Kraldar scrambled to maintain balance, its claws sparking against stone. Elias leapt backward, catching the edge of a stable ledge as the cavern floor crumbled beneath him. Dust surged upward in a choking wave, obscuring everything. Through the haze, Elias saw the creature thrash to anchor itself. It succeeded, barely, gripping a protruding slab with taloned hands. The rest of the floor collapsed into a pit of darkness below. Elias pulled himself onto firmer ground, chest heaving. The creature, though wounded and shaken, still clung to life. But it no longer looked at him with contempt or basic predatory instinct. Something deeper flickered in its eyes, a recognition of equal threat. Above the cavern, Varric and Threx watched their monitors fill with seismic readings and dust interference. Threx's voice crackled. "He's killing himself for sure this time." Varric shook his head slowly. "No. Dane isn't trying to win by force. He's forcing it to see him." Below, as the dust settled, Elias met Kraldar's stare across the fractured abyss. Neither moved. Both reevaluated. Both understood the next encounter would be unlike anything before. And as the cavern continued to groan under shifting weight, the hunt transformed into something far more dangerous than pursuit, mutual respect edging toward a final reckoning. Elias crouched on the edge of the fractured cavern floor, muscles tense, every nerve attuned to the slightest tremor. The air was thick with dust, the scent of scorched stone and mineral tangs heavy in his nostrils. Across the pit, Kraldar clung to the jagged ledge, one massive claw embedded in the rock while the rest of its body dangled precariously over the abyss. The creature's eyes, glowing faintly in the dim light, tracked him with intelligence, frustration, and a hint of something Elias couldn't name. Respect, perhaps. Or recognition. He pressed a hand to his ribs, feeling the sting of the two deep gashes, and reminded himself that pain was a signal, not a limiter. Every scar had taught him a lesson in survival. Every failure had refined his strategy. Kraldar had adapted, adjusted, evolved mid-hunt. It had become more than a monster, it was a rival mind. Elias smiled faintly, a grim acknowledgement of that truth. The canyon walls rumbled again, minor tremors amplified by the cavern's resonance. Elias knew he couldn't rely on collapse alone. The creature's claws dug in deeper, talons flexing against the shifting rock. He needed another approach, calculated, precise, and humane. Killing it wouldn't prove anything. It would only destroy the intelligence he sought to measure, the apex predator he wanted to understand. He reached into his duffel, producing a compact comm crystal and a series of reflective rods. Setting them across the cavern floor, he activated a subtle pattern of pulses. The light and vibration combination wasn't designed to harm, but to communicate, to appeal to the predator's logic circuitry. Elias had studied behavioral protocols of apex hunters across galaxies. Kraldar had never encountered a species willing to reason with it mid-hunt. The creature tensed. Its tail lashed instinctively, sweeping loose stones into the abyss, but it didn't strike. Instead, it studied the pattern, its cognitive faculties parsing the unfamiliar signals. Elias held his breath, allowing the pause to lengthen. Every second of hesitation confirmed his theory. Intelligence, when recognized, could tame even the most lethal force. Above the cavern, Varric's claws flexed against the edge of the observation viewport. "It's waiting," he muttered. Threx's multiple eyes tracked Kraldar's every twitch. "It knows," he rasped, "that it could end him in a heartbeat. But it hesitates." "Humans," Varric said slowly, voice gravelly with awe. "They fight with their minds, not their muscles. That's what scares apex predators." Elias shifted slightly, leaning forward on his hands. "You're bigger, faster, stronger," he said quietly, tone calm but firm. "But you aren't invincible. You're a pattern, a strategy. And I understand patterns." Kraldar's talons scraped against the rock, claws glinting as it flexed, testing its grip. Its breathing was deep, resonant, controlled. For the first time, Elias could see deliberation in the creature's eyes, a recognition that the hunt had transformed into a negotiation. He took a careful step forward, then another, hands open and visible. "I'm not your prey," he said. "I'm your equal. You hunt to survive. I survive to understand. That's the only difference between us." The predator shifted again, its massive frame tilting, claws clawing deeper into the ledge. It emitted a low vibration resonant through the stone, a sound neither roar nor hiss, but a signal of acknowledgement. Elias's pulse quickened. The apex predator had never yielded to anything. Not fleets, not genetically enhanced soldiers, not traps designed by the most advanced civilizations. And now it had paused. Elias crouched slightly, showing no aggression. His gaze never left Kraldar's. Slowly, deliberately he extended one hand. The movement was measured, non-threatening. "We can end this differently," he said. "I don't need to kill you. You don't need to kill me. There's mutual benefit here if you can see it." Kraldar's eyes narrowed, then flicked briefly toward the fractured canyon floor, then back at Elias. Its tail coiled around the ledge like a spring, poised yet restrained. For the first time, the creature's posture was no longer purely predatory. Elias felt the shift, a momentary suspension of hostility, the emergence of trust born from recognition of intelligence. He took another cautious step forward. "You survive. I survive. We leave, and the galaxy will remember this day not for who fell, but for who understood." The predator's head tilted, sensory tendrils flicking in rhythm with the cavern's echo. Then, in a motion so fluid it seemed choreographed, Kraldar released its grip partially and lowered itself closer, talons scrabbling harmlessly against stone rather than flesh. Its body coiled, eyes maintaining contact, a silent agreement forming across the chasm between species. Elias exhaled slowly, relief tempered with adrenaline. He knew the battle wasn't over, the creature could withdraw at any second, but this was progress. A breakthrough. The apex predator that had terrorized the galaxy now recognized him as an entity beyond prey, an equal in intelligence and resolve. From above, Varric's claws drummed lightly against the viewport. "By the stars," he muttered. "He's done it. He's tamed it without a single kill." Threx's mandibles clicked rapidly. "Impossible," he said. "And yet, we see it." Elias crouched fully now, close enough that the predator's talons scratched harmlessly past him. "I need to know," he said, voice low but firm, "how you think, how you hunt. And in return you will survive this world." A low vibration emanated from Kraldar, almost melodic in cadence, a sound of acknowledgement and respect. The creature shifted its massive bulk, moving fully onto the stable ledge. It remained tense but restrained, watching him with intelligence rather than aggression. Elias mirrored the gesture, slowly relaxing his posture, careful to radiate no threat. The moment stretched, electric with possibility. Across the galaxy, mercenaries had refused this contract, citing certain death. Here, in a remote canyon on a death world, one human had succeeded, not through brute force, not through technology alone, but through understanding, strategy, and calculated courage. Elias took one final step closer, extending a hand fully. "We survive," he said, voice resonating in the cavern. "Together, in this moment, we prove something the galaxy refuses to believe, that intelligence, patience, and understanding can make a human the apex predator's equal." Kraldar's talons shifted again, a soft vibration acknowledging the gesture. It tilted its massive head, and in that motion, Elias felt the silent promise of recognition, a bond forged not through dominance but through mutual respect. He withdrew his hand slowly, stepping back toward the cavern entrance. The predator followed, keeping pace but never advancing aggressively. Together, human and apex predator moved through the fractured canyon, a precarious alliance shaped by intellect and instinct alike. And as Elias emerged into the light of Ravkar's toxic sun, bruised, bloodied, but victorious, he knew the galaxy had witnessed something unprecedented. One human had faced the impossible, and had survived not by force, but by proving the power of the mind, the resilience of ingenuity, and the audacity of humanity itself. The hunt was over. The legend had begun.